dates back to the 1930s, is played out every day in the historic Peabody Hotel, where a family of ducks inhabit the fountain in the lobby. A historic tradition is being formed at Memphis Motorsports Park as well, with the running of the Pennzoil Nationals presented by AutoStone. This is Warren Johnson, and this is the semifinal round of Pro Stock competition. 500 cubic inch engines a pair, 2 Pontiac Firebirds. Ricky Smith, the top qualifier for the 3rd time this season. He's won 1 race this year in that Carrier Cutlass out of the ownership of Troy Humphrey. For Warren Johnson, he is trying his best to catch Jim Yates in the Winston points chase, but those 3 wins in a row at the start of the season has set him back a good ways. Yates has got a big lead. A close race to the finish line, and this one had a margin of victory of only 19 thousandths of a second, just a few inches at the stripe, as Warren Johnson advances into the final round. His elapsed time, 7:20, at a speed topping 193 miles an hour, and that is probably the best indicator of what the heat is doing to these Pro Stock cars. They just can't muster more horsepower out of their carbureted 500 cubic inch racing gasoline-fed engines. This was a close race from start to finish. There's the margin of victory. It's 19 thousandths of a second, as you can see, just a couple of feet. Steve is with WJ at the moment.
We are live with Warren Johnson and his trusty Pontiac here in the staging lanes. You qualified only number 5, the worst of the year.
Well, this thing was a little rough out here as far as qualifying. In fact, there's a lot of cars that should have qualified, didn't make it. There was only 1 real session to qualify, and that was Friday night. Actually, I was number 1 qualifier first round on Friday. That wouldn't even held up for the bump spot on Friday night, so it's pretty tough out here just qualifying, especially as close as the fields are nowadays.
Tell me about the bumps in this racetrack. They don't bother the nitro cars. The Pro Stocks gives them fits.
Well, the suspended cars, I don't think they're really bumps. They're more like moguls, is I think what we should really call them. It just upsets these cars with suspension, and we really can't get a handle on them to make the car accelerate all the way down the racetrack. We can get the first third of it about right. The middle is real rough, and then the other end isn't too bad, but getting all of it, pretty tough.
Good luck to you, Warren.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Right now, Warren knows who he races in the final. We're going to show you.
Well, maybe we just ought to add Pro Stock racing to the X Games. That might be something exciting, going over the moguls in one of these super fast cars. Here is the Dyna-Gyros Mobile Cutlass, Steve Schmidt. He is a supplier of engines, as Steve told you earlier, 13 of them, in fact, here at this race, and utilized by a number of different competitors. That is Tony Yates, the wife of Jim Yates, the leader in the Winston points chase. He is at the wheel of the McDonald's Pontiac Firebird out of that Joe Gibbs racing team. The engine builder for Jim Yates, Dick Maskin. He also a supplier to a number of competitors at this event. This has a whole lot of ramifications over and above just winning here in Memphis. Bragging rights at stake. Schmidt had the early lead but could not hold on to it. If I had to guess, he was involved in that same tire shake that he talked about after his round number 2 race. So it is Jim Yates to go to the finals to race against Warren Johnson. 7:22 the elapsed time for Yates. The margin of victory in that run, as we get a chance to look at it one more time, was 50 thousandths of a second. See what I meant about the early lead going to Steve Schmidt in the far lane. He's got it as they make the transition off the concrete onto the asphalt, but he just could not hold on to it. Yates and that Maskin horsepower closed big, and by the time they hit the stripe, the margin of victory, about a fender length or a little more, going to Jim Yates. Bob Fry is with our finalist at this time.
Jim Yates, I need to ask you about 2 things here as we get set for the finals. First of all, tell me about the lane. You know you're going to be on the right side.
Well, I don't think that right lane is such a disadvantage. Ricky won a 24 over there out on the last run. We looked at the graph. It looked like it had a lot left in it. We got a pretty good plan for getting down it, and I think we're going to be all right over there.
The second question might be a little bit more important. Tell us about the engine change. You just put Top Gun in there.
Well, we broke a rocker arm on the last run down the track. I had to run it really hard in a couple of the gears because it was shaking to beat Steve, and I broke a rocker arm, just over revved it a little bit, so we put Top Gun back in the car. This is the fastest motor we have in the camp right now, and I wanted to run it in when we got here, but Richard said no, we start with the other one first. So
Well, everybody's giving their cars and their engines names now. So Top Gun's going to try to take on the top dog, the Winston champ. It's Yates and WJ coming up in what should be a dynamite Pro Stock final.
As it was in Top Fuel, a battle of the leaders in the Winston points chase here in 1996. Jim Yates is the guy that's got a big lead over Warren Johnson, but WJ trying to close him out here at the start of the summer season. They've met twice thus far, and Jim Yates leads the series 2-0. But Warren Johnson has the lane choice in the final round in Pro Stock. We'll see that in a few moments. Coming up next from Memphis Motorsports Park in the Pennzoil Nationals, it's Top Fuel Racing and the Pennzoil Nationals, and it is hot, but we're racing, and we're seeing some outstanding action. I'm Dave McClelland, along with Steve Evans and Bob Fry, and we're getting set to go into Top Fuel Eliminator, where we have seen the best performances of all of our categories this weekend, with that unbelievable blast by Blaine Johnson at a 466. Coming up later tonight on the baseball game of the week, Eric Davis and the Cincinnati Reds meet up with a struggling New York Mets led by catcher Todd Hundley. That's tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern on the Sunday night baseball game of the week. The diehard qualifying ladder in Top Fuel found Blaine Johnson, the new track record holder, with a shocker of 466 to lead the list. Down at the bottom, and this was a surprise, Larry Dixon at the wheel of Don Prudhomme's car with a 5 flat elapsed time. In round number 1 action, Dale Armstrong directed Kenny Bernstein right to the spot he wanted him. His opponent, Doug Herbert. Bernstein hazing the tires in and out of the throttle a couple of times down the racetrack, but he got the win with a surprising 488. The points chase, very tight. For further details on the Winston standings, here's Steve.
Blaine Johnson and Larry Dixon came into Memphis number 1 and number 2 in Winston Top Fuel points. In qualifying, Johnson ran according to form, number 1 again, the 6th time this still young season. However, Dixon struggled mightily, barely qualifying in the 16th and final spot. In round number 1 today, the two would meet head-to-head. And unless crew chief Wes Cerny had found a miracle overnight, it appeared that Blaine Johnson would extend that points lead.
35 hundredths of a second plus separated these two drivers on paper in their first round matchup. A lot was at stake in the Winston chase. This one was all Blaine Johnson, 476 at 301 miles an hour. In replay, we're going to get a chance to take a look at the problems that Larry Dixon had been suffering throughout the entire weekend. His crew chief, Wes Cerny, just never could get a handle on the tune-up here in the heat. Blaine Johnson drove away from him, was stuck to the pavement pretty good. That's indicated by a speed topping 301 miles an hour. So Blaine Johnson advanced to round 2.
Blaino, a fair-weather California team isn't supposed to be able to do this.
Well, it comes from a lot of practice, being out on tour for quite a while. Alan's got a lot of knowledge on these kind of tracks. We raced a lot of these tracks when we raced alcohol. You know, some of those tracks weren't all that great. So he knows how to get down a bad track. And
Anything you had to do?
oh, it almost started to smoke the tires out there, dried up, took off.
He won 2 alcohol titles here.
The pairings for round 2 found Johnson against Vandergrift, Scott Coletta against Mike Dunn, while Scott's dad, Connie, raced Kenny Bernstein and Joe Amato against Corey McLenathan. Vandergrift left the red light at the starting line. Blaine Johnson had an easy go of it. He ran 482 at 299 miles an hour. That advanced him to the semifinal round. A lot of tire smoke. For Scott Coletta, Mike Dunn with a big win at 485, 296. Dunn has been the shocker of this race all weekend long. Kenny Bernstein defeated Doug Herbert, as you saw in first round action. He defeated Connie Coletta in round number 2 with a fine 485. Then the race of the second round was Joe Amato in the near lane against Corey McLenathan. Oh, my goodness, a 475 at over 306 miles an hour defeated a 487 at 302. Amato is definitely on a roll here in the heat at Memphis. Our instant replay shows you once again the Key Auto Parts car in the near lane, the McDonald's car in the far lane. Corey McClenathan put forth a valiant effort. He ran over 302 miles an hour on this charge, but guess what? It was all Joe Amato, 306 at 475.
Take that, Memphis. Joe Amato 475.
In the heat of the day, Steve. That's awesome. You know, this track owes me last year. We didn't qualify here. You know, always God pays you back when you have tough times, and he's been sitting on my shoulder all weekend, and hopefully we can keep it going. Jimmy Prock and the boys detuned a lot. I have to thank Vic Leahy. Come over and talk to Jimmy. He gave us a little bit of help there. You know, the teams all help each other. That's what's nice about drag racing.
2 more of those, he'll be invincible.
Well, Joe is practically invincible as it is. Let's take a look at the 5 quickest times in NHRA history from that 462 weeks ago by Kenny Bernstein up at Columbus down through the 466 with a 5 Blaine Johnson. That is not only his personal best, but the 5th quickest elapsed time in the history of drag racing. Top Fuel semifinal action. It's getting ready. We're going to come back here to Memphis Motorsports Park. You'll see it live on ESPN Speed. This was a magnet for rock and roll wannabes. Today, Sun Records is now legendary as the launching pad for some of rock and roll's most famous acts. And we're rocking and rolling with a semifinal round of Top Fuel Eliminator. Blaine Johnson may have had an easy go in round 2 when Bob Vandergrift Jr. left the red light at the starting line. This time, though, the challenge is maybe a little bit stronger. Mike Dunn at the wheel of Daryl Gwynn's Mopar machine has been absolutely superlative all weekend long. They've not heard any parts during eliminations, and that is so critical here in the rounds of racing. Blaine Johnson utilizing his brother Alan and his dad Everett as the basic crew on this race car 4 times. Blaine Johnson had won a Winston championship at the wheel of a top alcohol dragster, and as Steve told us earlier, he had visited the winner's circle here twice before, driving that same alcohol car. That's Alan Johnson giving the let's go get him to him. Blaine Johnson in the near lane in the Travers Tool Company car. Mike Dunn for Daryl Gwynn. Oh, and tire smoke. That's the first time we have seen Blaine Johnson smoke the tires all weekend. And the interesting thing to note here is he changed lanes just before this round of eliminations. His 466 came in the right-hand lane, and yet he moved over to the left. Who knows what the reasoning was? Let's go to Steve.
Yeah, indeed. Who knows? But let's not forget that Mike Dunn won here at Memphis in 1991 in a funny car. And, Mike, you were runner-up last year to Corey Mack. But quite honestly, I didn't think we'd be talking live here on ESPN before the final today.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a tricky track, you know, and today your objective is just to get it to the finish line under power. And if you can do that, you've got as good a shot as anybody. It's a very tricky track, and, you know, we've got a good crew here. Ken Vinny and the rest of the team have gotten this Mopar Performance Top Fueler running okay. We did good in qualifying, and hopefully we can do it today.
And you're keeping the oil in the crankcase where it belongs.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I don't think, hopefully you won't see any Atlantas here. You know, we don't want no fireballs at any time today, but it is running good. We're not hurting parts, and, you know, we're going to go for the win.
Okay, well, folks, Mike Dunn knows who he's racing in the final round. He knows he won't have lane choice. We're going to show you right now.